There is a river in the Greek underworld that doesn't burn you. It doesn't torture you. It doesn't chain you to a wheel of fire or condemn you to push a boulder for eternity. It does something so much worse than any of that. It makes you forget. Not some things. Not the painful things. Everything. Every person you ever loved. Every moment that made your life yours. Everything you ever were, gone in a single sip. This is Lethe. And every soul in Greek mythology had to drink from it. The Greeks had a complicated relationship with death. They weren't afraid of Tartarus the way we might expect. They weren't afraid of Cerberus, or Charon, or even Hades himself. What they were afraid of, what kept them up at night, what they whispered about in the dark, was this. The idea that death wasn't an ending. It was an erasure. The Greeks believed your soul survived death. But survival wasn't the good news. Survival meant you had to face Lethe. And Lethe didn't care who you were. It didn't care if you were a great warrior or a poet or a mother or a child. It didn't care if you had lived a life so full and so meaningful that every single day of it was worth remembering. One sip. And it was all gone. Today we go deep into Lethe, the river of forgetting, the most psychologically disturbing concept in all of Greek mythology. And by the time this video is over, I promise you'll never think about memory or identity the same way again. To understand Lethe, you have to understand the Greek underworld. Not the Hollywood version. Not fire and brimstone and a red-horned devil. The real Greek version, which was far stranger and far more terrifying. The Greek underworld was a place of shadows. Mostly gray. Mostly silent. Not punishment for most people. Just existence. A quiet, dim continuation of being, stripped of everything that made life feel like life. Each one with a different purpose. Each one with a different horror. The Styx, the river of hatred, the boundary between the living world and the dead. The river god swore oaths upon because breaking an oath sworn on the Styx was the one thing that could actually punish an immortal. The Acheron, the river of pain. The one Charon ferried souls across. The first thing you touched when you arrived. The Phlegethon, the river of fire. Not water at all, but liquid flame, burning its way through the dark underworld in rivers of impossible light. The Cocytus, the river of lamentation. Where the wails of the unburied dead could be heard echoing through the darkness, crying for a proper burial that would never come. And then, Lethe. The river of oblivion. The river of forgetting. The river that didn't punish you, didn't burn you, didn't make you cry. It just erased you. Lethe means forgetting in ancient Greek. Some sources trace the word to Lethe, concealment, hiddenness, the state of not being known. Its opposite was aletheia, truth, unconcealment, the state of being fully known and remembered. In Greek philosophy, the opposite of forgetting wasn't remembering. It was truth itself. Which means Lethe wasn't just a river. It was the destruction of truth. The erasure of the reality of who you were. Here is what the Greeks believed happened when you died. You arrived at the underworld. You crossed the Acheron with Charon, if you had a coin. You were judged by the three judges of the dead, Minos, Rhadamanthus, Aeacus. Based on how you lived, you were sent somewhere. Tartarus, if you were spectacularly evil. Elysium, if you were spectacularly virtuous. And the asphodel meadows, a gray, neutral nothing, if you were everyone else. Which was most people. You came to Lethe. And you drank. One mouthful of water from this river, and every memory you had ever formed, every face, every name, every feeling, every moment of joy or grief or love or regret, dissolved. You didn't experience the loss. That's the most disturbing part. You didn't feel it happening. There was no moment of grief as the memories faded. One moment you were yourself, fully, completely, achingly yourself, and the next moment you were a blank, weightless soul with no past and no identity. You didn't lose your memories. You became someone who had never had them. And then, for most souls, you waited. Waited to be reborn. Into a new life. A new body. A new name. Built from nothing, because nothing was what you brought with you from the last one. The Greeks believed in reincarnation. And Lethe was the mechanism, the reset button between lives. The way the universe ensured that each new life started clean, without the weight of everything that came before. But here's the question that should stop you cold. If your memories are gone, if everything that made you who you are has been washed away, are you still you? Or is the thing that gets reborn just a body with your soul inside it? A stranger wearing your existence? But not everyone drank from Lethe. The Orphics, that mysterious Greek cult we talked about before, believed something radical. They believed that forgetting wasn't required. That it was a trap. That the whole point of existence was to remember, across every lifetime, who you truly were. And they believed there was another river. Mnemosyne. The river of memory. The river that was the antidote to Lethe. Mnemosyne was also the name of the goddess of memory. The mother of the 9 muses. The keeper of everything that had ever happened. The Orphics believed that if you knew, if you had been initiated into their mysteries, if you carried the right knowledge with you into death, you could find the river of memory instead of the river of forgetting. You could drink from it. And remember. Everything. Every life. Every moment. The full unbroken thread of your entire existence across every incarnation you had ever lived. They were tiny sheets of gold, inscribed with directions for the soul. Instructions for navigating the underworld. And they included this specific warning: when you arrive, you will see 2 springs. On the left, a white cypress tree, that is Lethe. Do not drink from it. On the right, cold water flowing from the lake of memory, drink from that. The tablets even included what to say to the guardians of Mnemosyne. How to identify yourself. How to prove you were worthy of remembering instead of forgetting. Think about what that means. These people were so afraid of being erased that they buried instructions with their dead. Just in case. Just in case memory was something you could choose. The most detailed description of Lethe in all of ancient literature comes from Plato. In the Republic, his masterwork on justice and the ideal society, Plato ends with a story. A vision. The myth of Er. Er was a soldier who died in battle. But instead of being processed through the underworld like everyone else, instead of drinking from Lethe and forgetting, he was sent back to tell the living what he had seen. What he described was extraordinary. Not assigned. Choosing. standing before a great display of lives, human lives, animal lives, lives of different lengths and different types, and picking the one they would live next. And the choices were haunting. The soul of Achilles, the greatest warrior of the Trojan War, the man who chose a short glorious life over a long ordinary one, chose next to be a common man. Someone ordinary. Someone anonymous. Someone who would live long and unnoticed and die quietly. He had had enough of glory. The soul who had lived the most famous life in Greek mythology chose, when given a free choice, to disappear into obscurity. And then, after they chose, all the souls walked across the plain of oblivion. A dry, featureless wasteland. And at the end of it, Lethe. Each soul drank a measure. The amount they drank determined how much they forgot. The wise ones, said, drank carefully. Just enough. But others, those who weren't restrained by wisdom, drank more than they should have. And forgot more than they were supposed to. There's something in that detail that feels like a warning. Like Plato was saying, be careful how much of yourself you give away to forgetting. Even in the way you approach your own death, there are choices. Even there, wisdom matters. Now I want to step away from the mythology for a moment. Because this is where the psychological dimension of Lethe becomes almost unbearable. And I say almost, because the Greeks understood it completely. They built it into their cosmology. They made it a literal river, a literal place, a literal thing that happened to you. Because they understood something that modern psychology has only recently begun to articulate clearly. You are not your body. You are not your name. You are your memories. Memory is the architecture of identity. It's how you know who you are. It's how you know what matters to you, what you believe, what you've survived, what you love. Strip the memories and you don't have a simplified version of a person. You don't have a purer version. You don't have the essence of someone. You have a stranger. People with advanced dementia, people who lose their memories progressively, don't feel like themselves. The people who love them will tell you the same thing with devastating clarity. At some point, the person they knew was gone. Not dead. Gone. Replaced by someone who wore their face and lived in their house but didn't remember them. Didn't know them. Couldn't be known. That's Lethe. That's what Lethe is. Not a myth. A description of something that already happens. The Greeks were describing, in mythological language, the horror of losing yourself before you die. And they made it universal. They made it the fate of every soul. No exceptions. No matter who you were. No matter what you had built or loved or become. Lethe was waiting. Let me make this personal for a second. Because mythology only becomes real when it stops being abstract. One sip of Lethe and you would lose the face of the first person who ever made you feel safe. One sip and you would lose the specific way someone laughed, that exact laugh, the one you could pick out in a crowd of 1,000. One sip and you would lose the memory of the worst moment of your life, the one that broke you open and rebuilt you as someone who understood things you couldn't have understood before. One sip and you would lose the first time you realized you were in love. Not love in general. That specific, irreplaceable, world-rearranging moment when you understood what it meant to need another person. One sip and every scar that made you stronger would disappear. and so would every wound that was still healing. One sip and you would lose the version of yourself who survived the thing you were most afraid you couldn't survive. One sip and the person you've spent your entire life becoming, through loss and joy and failure and love and grief and growth, would simply cease to exist. And here's the part that really gets me. Everyone you ever loved would lose you too. Not to death. To oblivion. To the specific, complete erasure of knowing that somewhere, the soul that was once the person they loved is walking around in a new body with a new name and absolutely no memory of them. Not that the love wasn't real. It was. It just didn't survive the river. And that, somehow, is worse. But here's the thing the Greeks understood that we resist. Maybe Lethe wasn't cruelty. Maybe it was mercy. Think about what you carry. Think about the weight of everything you remember. The grief you haven't finished. The regret that wakes you up at 3 a.m. The version of yourself from 5 years ago that you're still embarrassed by. The moment you said the wrong thing to someone who deserved better. The opportunity you didn't take. The relationship you couldn't save. Now imagine carrying all of that, plus everything before it, into a second life. And a third. And a thousandth. The accumulated grief of 1,000 lifetimes. Every loss you'd ever experienced. Every person you'd ever loved who died. Every version of yourself you'd had to leave behind. At some point, isn't forgetting a kindness? Isn't starting fresh, not as a punishment, not as an erasure, but as a release, isn't that something a merciful universe might offer? The Orphics said no. They said memory was worth preserving across every lifetime. They buried gold tablets with their dead to make sure the soul didn't forget. Plato said it was complicated. Some forgetting was necessary. Too much was dangerous. The wise soul drank carefully. And the mainstream Greek tradition said, everyone drinks. No exceptions. The river exists because some things need to end completely before something new can begin. None of them were wrong. That's what makes this myth survive 3,000 years. Because we're still asking the same question. Every time someone survives something devastating and says, I just want to forget this ever happened, that's Lethe. Every time someone says, I would give anything to remember every detail, that's mnemosyne. We are still standing at those two rivers. Every single day. Choosing what to hold and what to release. Here's what I keep coming back to. The Greeks didn't put Lethe in their mythology as a horror story. They put it there as a fact. As the thing that waits at the end of every life, regardless of how you lived it, regardless of what you built or who you loved or what you survived. Lethe isn't a punishment. It isn't a reward. It isn't a judgment. It just is. And in some way, I think that's what makes it the most disturbing thing in all of Greek mythology. Not the monsters. Not the punishments. Not the cruelty of the gods. The quiet, absolute certainty that at the end of this, at the end of everything you are and everything you've done, there is a river. And it is patient. And it does not care how much you want to hold on. You will come to Lethe. The only question is whether you'll drink carefully or drain it.